Hey everyone, today is Thursday, February 5th. My birthday, by the way, so you can put a little happy birthday comment. That would be appreciated. It is Thursday, February 5th, and this is the Iran update. And things are moving really, really fast, so let's get right into it. The first thing I've got to mention is that yesterday, when I reported in my Iran update that the talks were called off, that was incorrect. They were called off briefly, or it was that announcement might have been made, might not have been made, but they were simply moving from Turkey to Oman. Now, let me also point out that the report that the talks were called off was from Axios, and the reporter from Axios who said it was a guy by the name of Barak Ravid. He's an Israeli guy he covers Israel for Axios and covers the Middle East for Axios, and I should have known better because Barak Ravid is always wrong, but that's a topic for some other time. Let's get right into the news from Iran. Okay, so here we have Ynet, that's a legitimate Israeli news source, reporting Israeli officials say Washington has urged Israel to hold off on independent military action against Iran while talks with Iran are underway. Now, this obviously should remind all of us of what happened during the 12-day war, right? Because during the 12-day war, when Israel attacked on June 13th, and the United States was in the middle of these negotiations. They were having the negotiations every weekend, and a couple of days before Israel attacked, President Trump even said that, oh yeah, we're going to have another round of negotiations this weekend, and the Israelis essentially ended those negotiations by starting the 12-day war. So this is the United States saying, hold off. We want the negotiations to run their course. Don't take independent action. It also signals where Israel is at. The fact that the Israelis had to be told this, because the Israelis are worried right now. Israeli interests and American interests regarding Iran are not identical. They're similar, but they're not identical. Because Israel looks at Iran and sees an existential threat. It sees a threat that is funding all of its proxies that have been attacking Israel for decades. So Israel's main enemies, Hezbollah, Hamas, these are funded by Iran, right? They are backed by Iran. They're Iranian proxies. Israel sees Iran as an existential threat that is trying to kill it, that is trying to destroy it. The United States does not see the Iranian regime that way. It sees it as a problem and as a bad actor, but not as an existential threat. And that's why the focus for the Americans tends to be more on the issue of the nuclear weapons and maybe some of their other nefarious activity, but they don't see it as urgent a problem. Israel has no fear of regime change in Iran. Look, this is a nation that is wholly devoted to destroying Israel. We don't need to worry or justify the fact that we want to take down a regime that wants to kill us. Just imagine in a private life, if you have someone whose stated single-minded goal is to kill you, you don't have to apologize for trying to kill them, for trying to neutralize their efforts to kill you. You don't have to worry about that. Iran does not pose that type of threat to the United States. So the Israelis are worried that if the United States comes to some kind of agreement that leaves the regime intact and just says, okay, they're not going to make nuclear weapons, or maybe doesn't limit their ballistic missile program enough, that could allow the Iranians to sit on their hands and not do anything nuclear until Trump is out of office, and who knows what the future holds. The Israelis have a real interest in bringing down the regime, and even though one could argue that it would be in America's best interest to do so, that's up to the Americans to decide, and they could determine that it's not necessarily in their best interest. So again, we have to keep that in mind all the time, that the U.S. interest and the Israeli interest are not identical. Now, beyond this warning to Israel, or this request from Israel not to take any action while the negotiations are ongoing, let's look at the negotiations. So yesterday in the update, I played a video of Marco Rubio that pointed out that there are really four issues. That's what Marco Rubio said. The four issues under negotiation are the nuclear, the ballistic missile range, the funding of the proxies, and the treatment of the people of Iran. Although Trump usually only talks about the nuclear. And look at this quote here. Ismail Kausari, a member of Iran's Parliamentary National Security Committee, so it's like the National Security Council in Iran, said, I am not optimistic about the negotiations. We are negotiating only to show the world that we are not avoiding talks. In other words, they're not really negotiating. Look at this. Missile capabilities and regional issues, that means, so missile capabilities, that's the ballistic missile range, and regional issues, it probably refers to the proxies. Missile capabilities and regional issues are not America's business, and it has no right to make demands in these areas. The negotiations will address only the nuclear issue. Uranium enrichment must take place on Iranian soil. Okay, that sounds like they're not really negotiating, and they're refusing to talk about the wider issues. And again, this points back to what I just pointed out. On the nuclear issue, everyone's in agreement on our side, the Israelis, the Americans, most of the Western world, who aren't insane, that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. But on the ballistic missile threat, and on the regime itself remaining in power, and on the funding of proxies, the American interest and the Israeli interest are not necessarily the same. Something to keep in mind, but here we have the Iranians essentially saying, hey, we're not really negotiating. And to add fuel to this, Trump warns Iran's supreme leader should be very worried. And this is from today, by the way. This is just from earlier this morning. U.S. President Donald Trump warned Iran's supreme leader should be very worried as both sides prepare for their first formal negotiations. The negotiations are supposed to take place on Friday. Trump said this. The high-stakes talks are scheduled to take place on Friday in the Omani capital, Muscat, and will involve Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff, according to Iran's state-affiliated Tasnim news agency. But look at this. Both sides appear to have different agendas. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed that the Trump administration wants negotiations to focus not only on Iran's nuclear program, but also the range of their ballistic missiles, their sponsorship of terrorist organizations across the region, and the treatment of their own people. That's what we talked about yesterday. Citing Iran's foreign ministry, Tasnim has reported negotiations will be limited to Iran's nuclear program and the lifting of sanctions as the country's primary demand. Okay? Excuse me. And then it talks about how they've held other talks in the past. And and it mentions the fact that the United States shot down an Iranian drone the other day, so things are heating up. But Trump warns Iran's supreme leader should be very worried. But as we've talked about, Trump intentionally does misdirection plays. Always at the same time, he makes a threat and he says, we want it to be negotiations, we want peace, but he should be worried, but we have a lot of military assets. The unpredictability and the misdirection plays are by design. As I pointed out in an earlier video, maybe some of you saw it, Trump, when he was first running for office in 2016, said this explicitly, that he sees the predictability of American foreign policy as a flaw and that we need to become more unpredictable. Now, Neil Berg just posted this. She posts a lot of stuff. She's an Iranian Jew, and she posts a lot of stuff from Iran. This is footage that just came out. This is footage that has new footage has been released from the massacre in Iran from earlier in January. Fire, gunfire, screams, death, absolutely apocalyptic. So take a look at this footage. It is pretty harsh. Basically a lot of chaos, a lot of screaming, a lot of pain, a lot of death, a lot of shooting. This massacre was serious. We now know that there were tens of thousands of people killed. So let's sum things up. Where are we right now with all of these negotiations? Here's where we are. President Trump continues to make threats. The Iranian regime is saying that they refuse to talk about anything other than nuclear. President Trump has been signaling that that might be the case because he only mentions nuclear when he talks about things. Although then he sometimes throws in, well, yeah, they have to be nice to their people. And for sure, the missiles are a bit of a problem. But We want them, they can't have the nuclear. He always emphasizes the nuclear. And at the same time, Secretary of State Marco Rubio listed 4 items for the negotiation. So what exactly is going to happen in these negotiations? We don't know. What will they lead to? We don't know. And it's, at the same time, the Americans have told the Israelis, hold your horses, don't do anything, let us negotiate. So that's our update for today. Obviously, this is a very dynamic situation. And let me add in that we need to pray, okay? I know we're always talking about politics, but we need to pray. We need to pray. God is in charge. Let's never forget, God is in charge, okay? God controls history. And his governance over history is total, okay? And, so people have free will, that's true, but world leaders have their free will somewhat impacted, governed to a certain extent by God more so than we do. There's a verse in Proverbs that says that the heart of a king is in the hand of the Lord, right? The heart of the king is in the hand of God. And what that's really saying, like, now you might say, well, everyone's heart is in the hand of God, but obviously what Proverbs is indicating is that world leaders who can affect the course of history, which is a divine plan, have some limitation on their free will that normal people don't have in their own private lives. So we have to make sure to pray into that over the course of the next few days. There's these big negotiations, historic things are happening, and we need to pray for the negotiations to go in the right direction, or for the end of this story to really bring liberty and freedom to the Iranian people. There's a lot on the table here. Okay, so let's pray about that, and we're going to keep an eye on the situation. We'll have more updates coming to you, of course, as things unfold. And please make sure to check out all the content we're putting up at Israel 365 on the channel there. There's a lot of important videos there. And I want to particularly point out that in the playlist section on the Israel 365 YouTube channel, there is a playlist called the Superpower Playlist. And it's a 6-part series, 6 short videos that lay out the case that Israel, over the course of the last little while, has really become a regional superpower in the Middle East. And I think you might find that interesting. So check that out. Okay, that's Israel 365 YouTube channel. Go to the playlists and check out the Superpower Playlist. All right, be well. God bless.